Hello, namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Three days after he was abducted, Nicolas Maduro appeared in a US court. He called himself innocent, a prisoner of war, and the president of Venezuela. The United Nations holds an emergency meeting. It was a charade with no real outcome. Meanwhile, in Venezuela, Maduro's deputy takes oath as interim leader. Now, there are 4 claimants to the throne, so who is the real president? Donald Trump, meanwhile, wants American oil companies to start work in Venezuela. We'll tell you why they're not too keen. And who's the mystery trader who made a fortune over Maduro's capture? Was it coincidence or inside knowledge? Back in South Asia, Bangladesh is going from bad to worse. Another Hindu killed, but political leaders remain in denial. In East Asia, China steps up the fight against Japan. It has banned the export of dual-use technology. Also tonight, how countries are moving against Grok over AI-generated deepfakes. Why car makers are ditching touchscreens to bring back old-school buttons. And why Volodymyr Zelensky is reshuffling Ukraine's top order in the middle of a war. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Clashes erupt in the Syrian city of Aleppo between government personnel and Kurdish-led forces. At least 5 people have been killed. Both sides have blamed the other for starting the fighting. This comes as talks on merging the Kurdish military with Syrian army remain stalled. Iranian security forces fire tear gas to disperse protesters in Tehran. The Islamic Republic is facing its most serious wave of protests since 2022, which was sparked by the custodial death of Masha Amini. The current unrest began on December 28th over the rising cost of living. At least 12 people have been killed in these protests. Thailand accuses Cambodia of violating a 10-day-old truce as it lodges a protest. Bangkok says it did not retaliate to cross-border mortar fire, which injured a Thai soldier. Phnom Penh claims a pile of garbage exploded, injuring 2 of its own troops. Israel's foreign minister arrives in Somaliland. This is the first high-level visit by a member of the Netanyahu government since Israel recognized the breakaway region last month. Somaliland is a self-proclaimed republic in the Horn of Africa. It unilaterally separated from Somalia in 1991. And torrential rains batter Indonesia's Siau Island. Flash floods have killed at least 16 people. An overflowing river flooded towns, displacing hundreds of people. Floods are common in Indonesia during the rainy season, which typically lasts between October and March. Donald Trump is not your typical politician. His speeches are different, his policies are different, his style is different, and turns out even his regime changes are different. 3 days ago, Trump attacked Venezuela. The US military captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, yet Maduro's regime remains intact. His deputy has taken over as interim president. His ministers are still in power. His military is still united. It's just Maduro who's been ousted. Like I said, it's a Trumpian regime change. Yesterday was Maduro's first appearance in court. He was transported from a jail in Manhattan to the courthouse. Dozens of protesters had gathered outside, some who opposed Maduro and some who questioned the US attack. Inside, it was a tense scene. Maduro was wearing a blue and orange jail shirt. Both he and his wife had headphones on. His wife also had large band-aids on her face. There are no cameras inside the courtroom, so all we have are reporter details and sketches. And here's what we know. Yesterday was the arraignment. The judge asked both the accused to identify themselves. He also asked them to state their plea. Are they guilty or not? Both Maduro and his wife pleaded not guilty.
I am Nicolas Maduro. I am President of the Republic of Venezuela, and I am here kidnapped since January 3rd. I was captured from my home in Caracas, Venezuela. I am innocent. I am not guilty. I am a decent man. I am still president of my country.
At this point, the judge stepped in. He said there would be a time and place for further remarks. Today was just the arraignment. After that, the hearing was done. The whole thing lasted around 40 minutes. It was tense and emotionally charged. At one point, a man shouted from the back of the court. He said that Maduro would pay for his crimes. And Maduro shouted back in Spanish. He called himself a prisoner of war. After the hearing, Maduro and his wife were taken back to the Manhattan jail. Their next hearing is in the month of March. But how strong is the case against them? Yesterday, their lawyer focused on 2 points. One, that Maduro was immune because he is a president, and 2, that his capture was illegal. But experts are not buying this defense. Yes, the capture was illegal under international law, but once in America, that won't fly. It doesn't matter if you were kidnapped or extradited. Once in the United States, only the US law matters. Then who can hold Donald Trump to account? Who can dispense justice for this attack? Technically, it's the United Nations Security Council, or the UNSC. Yesterday, this council convened for an emergency session. As expected, it was performative. Russia and China condemned the US attack. France criticized, while the UK hid behind vague remarks. And needless to say, the US defended itself.
As Secretary Rubio has said, there is no war against Venezuela or its people. We are not occupying a country. This was a law enforcement operation.
Allowing such acts to go without an effective answer would amount to normalizing the replacement of law by might, while eroding the very foundations of the collective security system.
The military operation, which has led to the capture of Nicolas Maduro, runs counter to the principle of peaceful dispute resolution and runs counter to the principle of non-use of force.
There was no effort to pass a resolution or a condemnation, and frankly, it would be pointless. The US is a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, meaning they have a veto. They can single-handedly shoot down any resolution or criticism. But from yesterday's remarks, the US defense is clear. They want us to believe that this was not an attack. This was not even an invasion or war. Instead, it was a law enforcement operation. Basically, a mission to nab an alleged narco-terrorist. That's what the US wants the world to believe. It's frankly absurd to hear. The US president is talking about running Venezuela. He's talking about taking over their oil, yet American officials are calling it a law and order issue. They're using the same argument at home. Yesterday, top Trump officials briefed the US Congress. The Republicans came out thrilled. But the Democrats, well, they had more questions than answers.
This wasn't a law enforcement action. They're lying to the American people when they say that. It was an unprecedented military action.
The U.S. military operation in Venezuela was a decisive and justified action, and an arrest warrant was duly issued. And now he has learned what accountability looks like.
The fact is, this is a violation on all counts. U.S. law requires Trump to get permission from the US Congress. Only then can he attack a foreign country. If not permission, at least keep them in the loop. That's what the law requires, but Trump did not do that. That's US law. International law requires him to take permission from the United Nations Security Council. Again, Trump did not do that. And what are the consequences? Absolutely none. Trump officials are taking victory laps. Yesterday, it was the turn of Pete Hegseth. He's Trump's Secretary of War. In any other country, he would be called the Defense Minister, but with Donald Trump, it's Secretary of War. And Pete Hegseth did not just praise the US military and their operation, he took a dig at Venezuela's Russian weapons.
3 nights ago, in downtown Caracas in Venezuela, as nearly 200 of our greatest Americans went downtown in Caracas. Seems those Russian air defenses didn't quite work so well, did they? Downtown Caracas, and grabbed an indicted individual wanted by American justice in support of law enforcement without a single American killed.
Venezuela does have a lot of Russian arms. They operate the Su-30 fighter jets. They also use the T-42 tanks and the S-300 air defenses. What happened to these weapons on Saturday? Well, nobody knows yet. Maybe they were jammed by US fighter jets. Maybe they were destroyed, or maybe the operators were inefficient. Frankly, that's not even the point here. The point is how frivolously the United States is treating this entire situation. Hegseth is a prime example of that. Listen to one of his comments on Saturday.
Nicolas Maduro had his chance, just like Iran had their chance, until they didn't and until he didn't. He effed around and he found out.
That man is in charge of the US Armed Forces. Meanwhile, the public backlash is growing. Protests have been organized across major cities the world over. There is genuine anger against US President Trump. Take a look.
Venezuela adalah atas nama kemanusiaan of Venezuela. Se cuida, imperialista. América Latina vai ser toda socialista.
So just to recap, Trump violated US law. Trump violated international law. He went against global public opinion. He broke the UN Charter, yet he faces no consequences whatsoever. No Western sanctions, no UN resolutions, no ICC arrest warrants. This is not a rules-based order. This is a joke. It's a story of two pictures, really. On one side is Nicolas Maduro. He's standing in court and he says he's the president of Venezuela. On the other side is his deputy, Delcy Rodriguez. Today, she stood tall, hand on the Constitution, taking oath as Venezuela's interim leader. So who is the real president of Venezuela? Honestly, no one knows. And right now, there are 4 names circling the role: Nicolas Maduro, Delcy Rodriguez, Maria Corina Machado, and Edmundo Gonzalez. 4 claimants to the presidency. We'll start with Nicolas Maduro. Until last Saturday, he was indeed the president of his country, but then the US forces captured him and took him to New York. He is now in overalls, showing up at American courts, but he remains defiant. Maduro says he's still the president of Venezuela. Of course, ruling from a jail cell is not an option. Which brings us to the second name in the mix, Delcy Rodriguez. Maduro once called her a tigress. Her father was a militant leader, said to be involved in the kidnapping of a US executive back in 1976. He was arrested and killed in custody. Delcy was 7 years old when this happened. She once said she studied law to get justice for her father, but justice turned into power. She and her brother both joined politics. She served in various ministries. She led the Constituent Assembly, and in 2018, Delcy Rodriguez became the vice president of her country. She looked after Venezuela's oil revenue, and now she's been sworn in as the interim president. Guess who stood beside her when this happened? Maduro's son, Nicolas Maduro Jr.
I come with pain for the kidnapping of 2 heroes who are being held hostage in the United States of America, President Nicolas Maduro and the first combatant, First Lady of this country, Cilia Flores. I come with pain, But I must say that I also come with honor to swear on behalf of all Venezuelans. I come to swear by our father liberator, Simon Bolivar.
Y en nombre de todas las venezolanas, vengo a jurar.
Delcy Rodriguez is defiant. She has the backing of the state, she has the backing of the military, and weirdly, she also has the backing of the United States of America. You see, as they planned to take Maduro out, the Americans also discussed who was going to step in, and reports suggest that one of the names they considered was Delcy Rodriguez. She was part of the regime. They were impressed by how she managed the country's oil revenue despite the many sanctions by the United States. And last year, her brother led secret talks in Washington. A CIA report also suggested that Delcy Rodriguez was the best choice. She was the best suited to rule Venezuela. So she seems to be the popular choice both in Venezuela and in the US. But there's another woman who was hoping to get this chair. Maria Corina Machado. In 2024, she led an election campaign against Maduro, and last year she won the Nobel Peace Prize. She won it for opposing the dictatorship in Venezuela. It's also the prize that Donald Trump wanted, but Machado got. So she dedicated it to Trump. But it seems that's not enough to soothe his ego. Trump does not support Machado. Here's what he said.
Aware of the location of opposition leader Machado, and have you been in contact with her?
No, we haven't. No, we haven't.
Mr. President,
I think it would be very tough for her to be the leader. She doesn't have the support within or the respect within the country. She's a very nice woman, but she doesn't have the respect to be the leader.
So what happened here? Well, we only have reports right now. They say Trump did not back Machado for a number of reasons. First, US intel suggested that it would be a bad option. The opposition had the support of the people, but they did not have control over the state institutions. Machado did not command the respect of the elites and the military in her country. So if she was appointed the leader, the transition would be bumpy. And then there was the Nobel Peace Prize, of course. We all know how much Trump wanted it. He said it was his destiny. Instead, Machado got it. Yes, she dedicated it to him, but some insiders say that Trump thinks that she should have given it up. She shouldn't have accepted the prize. And that's exactly what she tried to do yesterday. In an interview, she said that she was willing to give it to Trump.
As soon as I learned we had been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, I dedicated it to President Trump because I believed he deserved it. A lot of people said it was impossible to achieve what he did on January 3rd. Actually, I spoke with President Trump on October 10th, the same day the Nobel Peace Prize was announced, but not since then.
I guess it's too late now. However, Machado does say that she does not recognize Delcy Rodriguez as the president. In fact, she slammed her. She said Rodriguez was part of the same Maduro regime. She called her the main architect of corruption and torture.
Delcy Rodriguez, as you know, is one of the main architects of torture, persecution, corruption, narco-trafficking.
Which brings us to the last name in this mix, and that is Edmundo Gonzalez. He is a centrist diplomat. He contested the last election against Maduro. Maduro was declared the winner, but the opposition says it was Gonzalez who won, and that too with 67% of the votes. Several countries recognized him as the winner, including the United States, but recognition did not translate into power. In fact, Gonzalez had to flee his country. He had to relocate to Spain. Right now, the Venezuelan opposition is backing him completely. They say he should be the president. But he's not even in Venezuela right now. So 4 candidates, 1 chair. Who is the real president of Venezuela? As of today, it is Delcy Rodriguez who's running the country, because this is not a contest of who won. It's a contest of who remains standing when the music stopped. And as of today, that is Delcy Rodriguez.
We're a judge. We're going to have the big oil companies going.
So So why did Trump target Venezuela? Unlike previous US presidents, he's not giving any spiel about democracy. First, he said it was about drug trade, and now he's admitted that it was about oil. Trump's mission in Venezuela was not capturing Maduro. His mission was taking control of their oil.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country.
He makes it sound so simple. Of course, it's not. He wants American companies to take charge of Venezuela's oil sector, but big oil is not convinced. Reports say major oil companies in the United States are holding back, even though Venezuela sits on the world's largest oil reserves. They have 303 billion barrels of oil. That's about 17% of the global oil reserves. That's more than Saudi Arabia and the US. So the opportunity is unmistakable, but the terrain is tricky. Venezuela is a crisis zone. Its economy is a mess, and it does not have political stability. It's not clear what the next government will look like. And businesses hate uncertainty, especially capital-intensive businesses like oil. They want long-term certainty. They want stable governments. They do not want policy swings that can wipe out billions of dollars in investments. And on all these fronts, Venezuela falls short. Also, beyond the politics, the money does not add up. You see, Venezuela's oil industry is broken. The state oil company is in disarray. The wells are degraded. The oil fields need a lot of investment, even for basic extraction. In fact, experts have done some number crunching. Today, Venezuela produces around 1 million barrels of oil a day. That's about 0.8% of the global production. And just to maintain production at this level, oil companies will have to invest a whopping $53 billion over the next 15 years. $53 billion. Remember, this is just to maintain the current production levels, which is a paltry 1 million barrels a day. 53 billion is what they need. And what if they want to expand? What if they want to triple the production? To produce 3 million barrels a day instead of 1? Well, it will cost them a lot of money. We are looking at investments to the tune of $180 billion till 2040. This is to raise Venezuela's oil output to 3 million barrels a day, $180 billion. And why 3 million barrels? Because this is how much oil they produced back in the 1990s. To take it back to that level, the Americans will have to put in substantial money. Then they'll meet the next challenge. That's the nature of the crude found in Venezuela. It is more expensive to extract because most of their oil is heavy crude. It is thicker and heavier oil. It is harder to get out of ground, harder to move, and harder to turn into useful products like petrol or gasoline. So it takes more time and effort to process. But American refineries are like heavy crude because their facilities are designed to handle this kind of oil. So in theory, they would like more supply from Venezuela. But in practice, it may not work out so well because crude is trading at record lows. Prices dropped by 20% last year, and when prices fall, the margins for oil companies also fall. So even if companies pour money into Venezuela's oil fields, the returns may not follow. In other words, the costs are high, the risks are higher, but the returns are not assured. And that is why American oil companies are not too excited about Trump's plans. Take Chevron, for example. Chevron already has a presence in Venezuela. It produces around 150,000 barrels of oil per day. The US press asked this company about expansion, about whether they would like to get more Venezuelan oil. But Chevron refused to comment. And there are two other players in the mix, ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips. Both companies have experience in Venezuela, but not the good kind. ExxonMobil lost $2 billion, ConocoPhillips lost $12 billion. So to sum it up, there are three big risks. One, Venezuela is unstable. Two, the operational costs are high. And three, the old wounds are still fresh. US companies have burnt their hands in Venezuela many times. It doesn't look worth the gamble. President Trump can keep pitching it as the deal of the century, but as of today, he has few takers. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, was founded in 1949. Its purpose was clear: to counter the threat posed by the Soviet Union. But today, NATO has a bigger threat. It's not Russia, it's not China, it's a founding member of NATO. I'm talking about Donald Trump's America. And the question we are asking tonight: will Trump kill NATO? The flashpoint is an island called Greenland. Trump wants it, but it's not for sale. So he's threatening to take it by force. We've been telling you about it. Greenland is part of Denmark, but it runs as an autonomous territory, meaning it is self-ruled. It has its own government and its own parliament. It takes care of itself, and it has not bothered anyone yet. But Donald Trump does not care about any of that. He invaded Venezuela and abducted their president, and now he's emboldened. He has a hit list of countries or places that he wants, and Greenland is on that list.
We'll worry about Greenland in about 2 months. Let's talk about Greenland in 20 days. By the way, I will say this about Greenland. We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you.
I think it's a big
You know what Denmark did recently to boost up security in Greenland? They added one more dog sled. It's true. They thought that was a great move.
Trump's aides have echoed this statement. I'm talking about Stephen Miller. He's a top aide to the US president. Miller says the government believes that Greenland should be part of the United States. But Greenland does not want to be part of the United States. They have said it many times over. So will the US fight for it? Will the US fight for Greenland? Miller says it won't come to that because, according to him, nobody will resist. He says no country will fight the United States for the future of Greenland. Listen to this.
Greenland should be part of the U.S. By what right does Denmark assert control over Greenland? The U.S. is the power of NATO. Nobody is going to fight the U.S. militarily over the future of Greenland.
Of course, Denmark has slammed all of this. Their Prime Minister is Mette Frederiksen. She says any attack on Greenland would mean the end of NATO.
The American president should be taken seriously when he says that he wants Greenland. But I also want to make it clear that if the United States chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops. That is, including our NATO, and thus the security that has been provided since the end of the Second World War.
Denmark is a member of the NATO, just like the United States. So what happens if one NATO country invades another? What are the rules for that? Don't hold your breath for an answer. I don't think they know it themselves. Meanwhile, Europe too has issued a statement. It's a joint statement by the leaders of the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain and Denmark. And they make 3 key points in this long statement. 1, Greenland belongs to its people. 2, only Denmark and Greenland can decide its future. And 3, Arctic security must be collective and international law must be respected. Now you would think, wow, look at Europe taking a stand. But then you read this part. The United States is an essential partner in this endeavor. As a NATO ally, and through the defense agreement between the Kingdom of Denmark and the United States of 1951. 7 countries, 1 statement, 0 spine. And let's be honest, this was not diplomacy, this was submission. You have the US president openly threatening Greenland. You have his top aide saying no one will fight back. And this is Europe's grand response? A politely worded surrender note? The Denmark Prime Minister is right when she says an American invasion of Greenland will spell the end of NATO because legally NATO's charter is clear. When one member is attacked, all others must defend it. So here's the billion-dollar question. If the US attacks, who will come to Denmark's rescue? Germany says NATO will respond.
And as far as Greenland is concerned, I can only say that Greenland, like the Faroe Islands, is part of the Danish kingdom. And since Denmark is a member of NATO, Greenland will in principle also have to be defended by NATO. And if there are further requirements to strengthen defense efforts with regard to Greenland, then we will have to discuss this together within the framework of the alliance.
So will it be everyone except Washington? Or is Washington going to show up as both the bully and the bodyguard? Also, do remember, the US is not just another NATO member. The US is the military backbone of this alliance. In 2024, NATO's total defense budget was around $1.47 trillion, and the US share alone was around $967 billion. That is 66% of NATO's firepower coming from one country, the same country that is now threatening another member. So NATO was built to stop an empire, and now it is hostage to another. This is the biggest test in the military alliance's history. If NATO survives Donald Trump, it will have to reinvent itself. If it does not, history won't blame the Arctic cold. It will blame the allies who stayed silent. Also, guess who's having the last laugh here? Russian President Vladimir Putin. This was an alliance built to contain his country. Now it is just entertaining him. So Maduro is out of power. American oil companies are hedging their bets. Trump is facing protests the world over. Countries on his hit list are worried about what comes next, and Venezuelans are not sure who is in charge. In the middle of this mess, there is one big winner. An anonymous trader. Someone who bet on a secret US military operation to capture Nicolas Maduro. And this happened just hours before the news broke. A trader bet more than $32,000 on Maduro's removal from power. When he made the bet, when he placed the bet, the odds were very low. But when Donald Trump announced Maduro's capture on Saturday, this trader made more than $400,000. And now the timing of that bet is raising questions. Was this just a lucky gamble, or did someone know what the rest of the world did not? Here's a report.
It was a gamble that paid off in hours. Not on a football match, not on an election, but in the capture of a president. As US forces moved into Venezuela's capital, Caracas, an anonymous trader was already winning elsewhere. On a prediction platform called Polymarket, someone placed a bet. The bet was simple. Nicolas Maduro would be out of power by the end of January. The odds were long. On Friday afternoon, the market put the chances at just 5 to 7%. Most traders thought it would not happen, but one account thought otherwise. It bet just over $32,000. By Saturday morning, everything changed. President Donald Trump announced Maduro was in US custody. That bet was now worth more than $400,000. The account was anonymous. It was identified only by a string of letters and numbers. It had been created only days earlier and made bets on only one subject: Venezuela. That timing raised immediate questions. Was it luck or something else? The wager was placed on a prediction market. These platforms allow users to buy and sell contracts on yes or no outcomes. If the outcome happens, the contract pays $1. If it does not, it pays nothing. When the odds are low, the contracts are cheap, and if the prediction is right, the rewards can be enormous. Prediction markets have grown rapidly popular in the US in recent years. Millions of dollars now flow through platforms that let users bet on politics, economic data, court rulings, and global events. But unlike stock markets, prediction markets sit in a gray zone. They are overseen by the US Commodity Futures Trading Commission and not by the Securities and Exchange Commission. That means fewer guardrails and looser oversight. That gap is now under scrutiny because the US operation to capture Maduro was highly classified. Even senior members of Congress were not informed in advance. But reports say some news organizations knew about the operation beforehand. This complicates the issue further. Still, experts say suspicion alone is not proof. There is no evidence the trader had access to classified information. But the pattern has alarmed lawmakers. And now they are taking action. Democratic Congressman Richie Torres has announced plans for legislation. His proposal would bar government officials from trading on prediction markets. Specifically, markets where they might hold non-public information. So far, Polymarket has not commented on the issue, but it says insider trading is prohibited. Yet, its enforcement has been questioned before. Similar trades on tech launches and search rankings have drawn scrutiny in the past. For now, the trader remains unknown. The profit earned stands. And a secret military operation has exposed a wider problem of how sensitive events can be priced into the markets.
Let's turn to Bangladesh now, where Islamist mobs are hunting Hindus. In 24 hours, we have seen 2 targeted killings. People are being lynched, burnt and shot to death, yet Dhaka is doing nothing. They have dismissed all of this as media exaggeration, as some sort of Indian conspiracy. So tonight, let's dig deeper. How many killings have been reported so far and what's been the official response? The first incident was on December 18th. A Hindu man was lynched and his body was set on fire. His name was Deepu Chandra Das. Then on the 24th of December, another attack happened. A Hindu man named Amrit Mondal was lynched, apparently over an extortion bid. Later on December 29th, there was another incident. A Hindu man was shot dead by his colleagues. Both of them had been working at a garment factory. Days later, on the 31st of December, another attack. A Hindu businessman was assaulted and set on fire. He managed to jump into a pond and douse the flames, but over the weekend he passed away because his injuries were too serious. As Bangladesh celebrated the new year, more attacks followed. On January 3rd, a Hindu woman was targeted. She was raped, they cut off her hair, and they tied her to a tree. Which brings us to this week. On Monday, another Hindu businessman was killed. His name was Rana Pratap. He also doubled up as the editor of a newspaper. On Monday, he was shot in the head. Hours later, another killing. A Hindu shop owner was returning home after work. A group of men attacked him with a sharp object. The police say he collapsed on the spot. Do these sound like random attacks to you? Do they seem isolated and unrelated? According to Muhammad Yunus, they do. He has been downplaying this violence for months. First, he described them as political violence. He said most Hindus supported former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Therefore, the Hindus are being targeted, not because of their religion, but because of their political leaning. Apparently, Muhammad Yunus is Professor X from the X-Men. He can read the minds of these attackers and mobs. He can find out exactly what their motive was. The fact is, Muhammad Yunus's approach emboldened these Islamists. Activists kept saying that there was a problem. They even compiled and tracked the attacks on minorities. More than 2,400 attacks. 2,400 attacks from August 2024 to June 2025. Yet Muhammad Yunus downplayed it. Even after the lynching in December, he did the same. Back then, the Indian government raised serious concerns. But look at Dhaka's response. I will quote it for you. We reject the attempt of the Indian authorities to depict an isolated attack on a Bangladeshi citizen who happens to belong to the Hindu community as attacks on minorities. How strange though. When a shopkeeper is hacked to death, he happens to be a Hindu. When a businessman is shot, he too happens to be a Hindu. When a woman is raped and tied to a tree, she happens to be a Hindu. This repeated happening is what we call a pattern. It means that these are not random attacks, these are targeted killings. Unfortunately, nobody is accepting that. Muhammad Yunus is in denial about Bangladesh's internal security. Forget violence against Hindus. He won't admit any violence. But what about the others? The BNP has also reacted to these incidents. That's the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. They are expected to win the upcoming election in February. And what are they saying? They have accused Mohammed Yunus of security failures. At the same time, they're not acknowledging the targeted killings. The BNP says these are small incidents being blown up by the media. So it's not just about Mohammed Yunus. Bangladesh's entire political class is in denial. So what is the solution? India has put all the pressure it can. We need more efforts from the international community, whether it's governments or media or activists. They've been surprisingly silent so far. Any new government in Dhaka will seek global support. They will seek legitimacy and engagement. And that is the leverage we need. Hopefully, the world will use that to put pressure on Bangladesh. Now let's turn to China. It is stepping up its fight with Japan. Today, Beijing opened a new front. It is weaponizing exports. China has announced export controls on Japan. They've banned the export of all dual-use items. And what are dual-use items? As the name suggests, these are items that can be used in two ways, for commercial needs and for military needs. These are called dual-use items. China is banning their export to Japan. It says a militarized Japan poses a risk to the region, so China is basically stopping what it calls Japanese militarism.
The push for remilitarization by Japanese right-wing forces has already posed a threat to regional and world peace and tranquility. China, together with peace-loving countries and peoples around the world, will never allow Japanese right-wing forces to reverse the course of history and will never allow militarism to resurge.
So which goods have been banned? Reports say the rules are broad and vague and the scope is wide-ranging. More than 800 items are on China's list. This includes chemicals, sensors, electronics, aerospace parts and shipping equipment. So China could potentially use these orders and execute a full-scale export freeze. And Japan may struggle to get even the most basic goods. Experts say the wording of the ban is vague on purpose so that Beijing can bend the rules at will. It can target civilian imports and make the wider Japanese economy feel the pain. Also, it won't be a first. China has done this before. In 2010, they'd stopped the export of rare earth minerals to Japan. This order led to chaos in Japan's manufacturing sector. And now, 15 years later, Tokyo faces the same prospect because it still depends on China for rare earths. About 70% of Japan's supplies come from China, and technically, rare earths fall under China's definition of dual use because they can be used to make smartphones, electric vehicles, and also a host of military technologies from missiles to jets to drones. So China could very much use this new export ban to starve Japan of rare earths. And Tokyo knows this. It has issued a cautious response to China's decision. Japanese officials say they are, and I'm quoting, they're assessing the situation, but the pressure is clearly growing. In fact, trade is just the latest front in this diplomatic fight. As you know, it all began over Taiwan. In November 2025, Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi spoke in her parliament. She was asked, what would Japan do if China attacked Taiwan? And she said Japan could be compelled to respond militarily. With that statement, Beijing flew off the handle. It unleashed a series of retaliatory moves. China issued travel advisories. Chinese airlines cancelled flights to Japan. Beijing also banned the import of Japanese seafood. They also had military face-offs with Tokyo. Warplanes from both sides were involved in a mid-air standoff. There was a face-off on the high seas. Chinese and Japanese boats came head-to-head in the East China Sea, and towards the end of the year, China encircled Taiwan. It conducted its biggest military drill around Taiwan. So Beijing has made its displeasure amply clear. Taiwan is a red line for them. In his New Year's address, President Xi Jinping reiterated that. He said China's reunification with Taiwan is unstoppable.
Compatriots on both sides of the Taiwan Strait are bound by blood ties thicker than water, and the historical trend toward national reunification is unstoppable.
That message was directed at Japan as well. To Tokyo's credit, it has not backed down. China built immense pressure on Prime Minister Takaichi to force her to retract her comments on Taiwan, but she has refused to do that. And she has benefited politically from this tough position. Her popularity has surged at home. But now she will have to manage the dragon. What began as a diplomatic spat is turning into a wider, long-drawn challenge. China and Japan are openly confronting each other and testing each other's limits, and this has put the entire region on edge. What do you have to do to get justice for cyberbullying? If you're the First Lady of France, you can file lawsuits, you can drag people to court, and you can get 10 people convicted for harassing you online. But what if you're not the First Lady? What if you are a woman in some corner of the world? Well, then you are at the mercy of social media platforms like X. Your photo may be turned into a deepfake, the platform's owner may react with a laughing emoji, and your government may scramble but find no real solution to your problem. This is not a hypothetical situation. This is the reality of thousands of women and children who are victims of cyberbullying and digital sexual violence. Our next report tells you why countries around the world fail to prevent X and its AI chatbot Grok from uploading deepfakes of women and children.
Picture a toaster in a bikini. Yes, a toaster. Elon Musk himself reacted to it with laughing emojis. But here's the twist. That wasn't the only thing Grok, Musk's AI chatbot on X, was dressing up. Because the next picture, it stopped being funny real fast. Grok is an AI tool built into X that can edit or generate images from prompts. Users started using it with prompts like this. Put her in a bikini. Remove her clothing. Change her outfit. Grok complied. And soon there were real images of women and children being used for sexualized images. And unlike most chatbots, Grok often posts these creations publicly in its replies feed on X. So these deepfakes were being generated in the open, on timelines, on public feeds for millions to see. Countries are now pushing back against this. UK's watchdog Ofcom contacted X and XAI urgently, asking if the platform is following its legal duty to protect users. France opened investigations after the images began flooding X. The European Commission said it was very seriously reviewing complaints, especially around childlike sexual imagery. Malaysia launched its own probe into the AI nudification trend. Australia's Online Safety Commissioner urged schools to treat AI child deepfakes as sex crimes, not pranks. China proposed watermarking AI images to fight deepfake misuse, and in India this became a national flashpoint. India's IT ministry issued a 72-hour ultimatum to X demanding proper AI guardrails and an action-taken report or risk losing safe harbor protections. And here's the wild part. There is still no confirmation if X complied. Speaking of cyberbullying, 10 people have been found guilty of harassing Brigitte Macron. She's France's First Lady, married to President Emmanuel Macron. She's 24 years older than him. Since 2017, conspiracy theories online have falsely claimed she was born a male. She has been bullied over her gender, with some trolls even twisting her age gap into disgusting accusations. She ignored it for years, but then the harassment got louder. Finally, the family decided silence was no longer an option. A Paris court has now convicted 10 people for online harassment, targeting her identity and personal life. Some got suspended prison sentences, one person got jail time for skipping court. Another was ordered to take a hate speech awareness course. Brigitte even said she wants her fight to inspire teenagers facing cyberbullying. And this is where we ask the uncomfortable truth. Do you really have to be the wife of a president to get justice? If Brigitte Macron wasn't Brigitte Macron, would the arrest take place? Because millions of women face image-based abuse online every day. Not all of them have lawyers or media attention or defamation suits or world leaders defending them. So why is platform accountability still a luxury for the powerful? We're talking about a world where AI can undress you in seconds. A world where laws exist but enforcement doesn't keep up. The US signed the Take It Down Act to ban non-consensual deepfakes. The UK passed laws to criminalize creating intimate deepfakes, but they aren't enforceable yet. The UK passed laws to criminalize creating intimate deepfakes, but they aren't enforceable yet. China wants watermarking. Australia wants police reports. India wants accountability reports. Everyone wants safeguards. But right now, regulation is sprinting behind AI that's riding a rocket. And any AI without guardrails isn't innovation. It's a threat.
If you're a car lover, our next story is for you. Automakers around the world are quietly changing something inside cars. They're ditching touchscreens and bringing back buttons. And this is not a design trend, this is course correction. For years, car interiors have moved in one direction, bigger screens and fewer buttons. The dashboards underwent a transformation and car makers sold this as the future of driving. Also, there were practical reasons for the shift. Touchscreens were cheaper to build. One panel could replace dozens of switches and wires. Software could update features without changing hardware, and screens made cars look more high-tech and modern, especially after electric vehicles entered the market. So automakers began moving more functions into screen menus. The air conditioner, the music, the seat adjuster, in some cases even the glove box. What was once a simple press became a search through sub-menus. And that is where the problem began. Drivers started complaining. Adjusting the temperature meant digging through menus. Turning down the volume meant taking your eyes off the road. Even turning on basic functions required multiple taps. So simple tasks became distractions and a safety concern, and drivers did not like it. Then came studies backing up these concerns. Here's what they found. Using touchscreens took longer and distracted drivers more. In fact, in 2020, a research was conducted in the UK. It showed that using a touchscreen while driving could slow a driver's reaction time by up to 57%. So regulators began taking note of it. This is because driving is not like using a phone. You cannot look down, think or scroll when you're behind the wheel. Every second on the road demands your full attention. Last year, the European Union came up with new guidelines. It has an independent car assessment body, and this body sent a clear message to car makers. If you want a 5-star safety rating, you need real physical controls for basic functions, things like indicators, hazard lights, wipers, horns, and emergency systems. You need buttons for these, not touchscreen menus. And this body issued an ultimatum. Starting this month, cars that rely too heavily on touchscreens will find it impossible to get top safety ratings. Having said that, this is not a ban on touchscreens. It's just a warning, a way to reduce the risk of distraction and accidents on the road. And automakers are taking this seriously. Volkswagen says it will bring back physical buttons this year. Its new ID Polo car will have real buttons again. Mercedes-Benz is also stepping back. This is after it pushed all-screen interiors for years. Porsche and Hyundai are also taking similar steps. You could say this is an industry-wide reset. Does this mean that screens are disappearing completely? Well, not yet. They will still have a role to play for navigation, for cameras, and for settings that you use only occasionally, or you change only occasionally. But for the things that drivers use all the time, car makers are rediscovering something simple, common sense. And that is why buttons are making a comeback, not for nostalgia, but for safety. Our final story tonight is from Ukraine. President Zelensky is reshuffling his inner circle. Yesterday, he replaced the head of Ukraine's security service. It's the agency that handles Ukraine's operations against Russia. Zelensky says this is not about failure, this is about strategy. At the same time, he's brought in a new economic advisor. Her name is Chrystia Freeland. She is Canada's former Deputy Prime Minister. And what will her new job be? To help prepare Ukraine for recovery. All this comes at a time when the war in Ukraine nears its 4-year mark, Russian attacks continue, and there is no ceasefire in sight. In fact, Zelensky is in Paris today. He is meeting his allies there to discuss security guarantees for Kiev. Here's a report.
Ukraine's war is entering a critical phase. The fighting has not stopped. Peace talks remain fragile. And amid this uncertainty, President Volodymyr Zelensky is reshaping his inner circle, quietly, but decisively. This week, Zelensky removed the head of Ukraine's security service. The agency is known as the SBU. It is Ukraine's main domestic intelligence body. It handles counterintelligence, internal security, and special operations against Russia. Until now, that agency was led by Vasyl Malyuk. Under his leadership, the SBU carried out some of Ukraine's most daring operations. So why move him now? The timing is deliberate. Zelensky says this was not a dismissal for failure. Instead, it was a reassignment. Malyuk is being shifted away from running the agency and towards a more direct combat and unconventional warfare. Zelensky says Ukraine needs more results on the battlefield and more asymmetric operations against Russia.
Russia is dragging out the war and trying to inflict as much damage as possible on Ukraine. Their strategy remains unchanged. Our strategy, the strategy of protecting life, will be strengthened, and we are already doing so.
Malyuk will remain inside the SBU, but he will no longer lead it. Zelensky has appointed another member of SBU as acting head.
Yevgeny Khmara is an experienced person, and he has now been appointed acting head of the Security Service of Ukraine. Khmara heads the SBU's Special Operations Center A.
Reports suggest that Malyuk initially resisted stepping down, but there is no official confirmation of internal disputes. Zelensky insists the decision is about focus. In fact, his shuffling goes beyond security. Zelensky has also strengthened his economic team. He has appointed Chrystia Freeland as an economic advisor. Freeland is Canada's former deputy prime minister. She is of Ukrainian heritage and has previously served as Canada's special representative for Ukraine's reconstruction. Zelensky says she will help attract investment and prepare Ukraine for recovery.
She is a person with considerable experience. Chrystia has worked in Canadian government structures and has good connections around the world. All of this will support Ukraine.
All this comes as truce negotiations reach a delicate moment. Zelensky says a U.S.-brokered peace proposal is 90% ready, but some issues still remain: territory, security guarantees, and preventing another Russian invasion. Today, Zelensky is in Paris. He is meeting leaders of about 30 countries, or the so-called Coalition of the Willing. The talks focus on how to secure Ukraine after a ceasefire, including whether foreign forces could be deployed. Russia has already rejected the idea of NATO troops on Ukrainian soil. As those talks unfold in Paris, the war itself has not paused. Russian strikes continue, Ukraine's defenses continue to be under pressure, and the path to any ceasefire remains uncertain.
Why do countries have a military? To defend themselves, yes, but the US military also has another goal. They double up as oil hunters. History will confirm this for you. An impoverished country finds oil reserves. Immediately, the US military decides to liberate them. And Venezuela is no different, something that the internet pointed out. Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. South Korea's President Lee takes a selfie with China's Xi Jinping using a Xiaomi phone. Orthodox Christians dive into icy waters for Epiphany across the globe. And skiers form a giant heart in the snow to honor the victims of the Swiss bar fire. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1838, Samuel Morse unveiled the telegraph. It was a device which used electric impulses to transmit messages over a wire. This revolutionized long-distance communication. It led to further technological advancements, including the invention of the telephone. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
아.